This episode is brought to you by Great Northern Viking Festival.
It's not just a festival, it's a feeling. Great Northern Viking Festival is where adventure comes alive, where the spirit of the North brings people together for something unforgettable. We're sounding the horn and calling out for all volunteers, partners, and sponsorship. Step in and start your saga. www.greatnorthernvikingfestival.com is where you can find all information on tickets and sponsorship and volunteering opportunities. All of our social medias are also Great Northern Viking Festival.
The Sea of the West Fjords has a way of shrinking a man's world. Cold water, narrow chances, and the quiet understanding that most men will live and die within sight of the same cliffs. Auðun was one of those men, poor, unknown, and by every reasonable measure, destined for a small life. But somewhere between hunger and ambition, he made a decision that feels almost absurd. He spent everything he had on a polar bear. Not for survival, not for trade, for a gift. And not just any gift, but one meant for a king. Now imagine that for a moment. You're a man with nothing, standing on the edge of the known world, choosing to risk it all on a single fragile idea. That unreasonable generosity, impractical, almost laughable generosity. It might actually open doors that strength and status never could. This is not a story about conquest. No battles, no armies, no glory carved in blood. This is a story about something far more dangerous in the Viking world. A man with nothing to lose, willing to risk everything for a better future. Because Auðun's journey will take him across kingdoms, into the courts of powerful rulers, and through moments where everything he believed in could have collapsed with a single wrong turn. And yet it doesn't. Fortune favors the bold, that's how the old saying goes. But this story adds an extra twist and asks, how does fortune favor the bold and the generous? In this episode, we're stepping into a quiet, brilliant tale straight from the sagas, a story that feels almost out of place in a world known for axes, raids, and fire. Because sometimes the man who has the ability to change his fate isn't the strongest, but the one that's willing to give everything away. What you're about to hear is taken straight from an Icelandic saga. I hope you enjoy. The Sea of the West Fjords does not listen to small dreams. It breathes cold into the bones of men and teaches them day after day what their lives are worth. A narrow strip of land, a handful of sheep, a name spoken by very few and forgotten by most. The wind carves its lesson into every cliff, into every face. You are going nowhere. This is all there is. Auðun was born into that truth. He was not a great man, average in every way. He was not a man destined for the sagas or for the lips of a skald. No chieftain sought his counsel, invited him to a feast, or viewed him as a valuable ally. He owned little, owed even more, and moved through the world unnoticed. If you had passed him on the path, you wouldn't think twice. You may only remember him as a man who simply stepped aside out of your way. But there are moments when life can take a dramatic turn, and that turn can hinge on one single choice. It began as many strange things do, with a rumor. A ship had come from the far north, weathered sailors, salt-cracked lips, and stories they couldn't hold to themselves. They spoke of ice floes that moved like slow beasts and skies that never seemed to settle. But it wasn't these stories that drew the crowd. It was the animal they found, a bear. Not like the ones known in Norway or scattered across the tales from the east. This one was as white as fresh snow, taller than any man when it rose. A creature of the frozen world brought south in chains by traders. It was a polar bear. The men searched for the ship looking for the bear, and then they found it. It's on that ship, right over there. It's alive, for now. Auðun listened. He stood at the edge of the gathering, silent as always, unnoticed, but letting the words sink in and his mind play a complicated what-if game. A white bear here, alive? That's the kind of thing kings might hear of and wish that they had seen first. His mind was racing. Something was stirring in him, a plan, but to what end? He didn't even think that far ahead. He arrived at the docks. He made his way through the crowd on the docks, through the loud movement and commotion. The ropes of the ships, they groaned. Wood creaked all around him. The smell of tar and fish and cold iron clung to everything. And there, at the far end, the ship that sat low in the water, it carried something. And that something was restless and waiting for an opportunity to strike. He heard it before he saw it. A forced breath and a roar, followed by what sounded like two ships crashing into each other. Then the sound of chains rattling and being pulled tight. Men stood back from the center of the deck. Even those who faced storms without flinching gave the bear its distance. And when Auðun stepped closer, the circle widened just enough to let him through. The bear lay there, worn and tired of resisting. It was massive. White fur, thick as winter, eyes dark and watchful. Its head lifted slightly as he approached, and for a moment, the world narrowed to that gaze. It was wild, but it wasn't mindless. It felt like it was aware of everything happening around it. Auðun felt something strange, a deep respect for the animal, a sense of the magnitude of what stood before him. This was not livestock for trade or valuable cargo. This was something pulled from the edge of the world and now forced into the realm of men. This was a once-in-a-lifetime experience for him and for everyone else lucky enough to witness the beast. Auðun took a step closer to the bear. "Careful," one of the soldiers said. "It has no love for humans." "Love to eat us, I suppose," said another. Auðun nodded, but didn't step back. "How much for the bear?" he asked. A sailor blinked. "How much? For the bear?" Laughter erupted, and the jokes came fast and furious. "You want to buy a bear for yourself? What will you do with it? Keep it in your house?" "He wants to ride it. He'd die before he could touch its fur." "Well, then he can ride it from the inside." More laughter. Auðun didn't pay attention to them. He simply said, "I asked the price." The mood shifted just slightly because he was serious. Men have a sense of when something is no longer a joke. The first sailor studied him more closely now, took in the worn cloak, his steady eyes, and there was nothing that resembled wealth, but the eyes said something different. The quiet, calm confidence was creating a tension that didn't quite add up. "It's not for the likes of you," he said. "This is going to a king who can afford it, or a rich man who wishes to be one." Auðun's eyes didn't waver. "Yes," he said, "that is exactly where it's going." Silence permeated the docks. The sailor exchanged glances. There are moments when men stand on the edge of another man's decision and feel, without understanding, that something is unfolding they can't stop. "You don't have silver," one said in a demanding tone. Auðun reached into the fold of his cloak. It wasn't much, more than anyone expected he would have, but the sum was enough to get the sly traders to hesitate. It might fetch 4 or 5 times that from a king, but then they would have to deal with transporting and feeding, and well, that would be quite the undertaking. Plus, it would be life-threatening, as they've already experienced on several occasions. He held it out anyway. "I'll give it all, my house included," he said. "You would spend everything," the sailor said slowly, "on a beast you can't control, just so that you can take it to your king, and then what? Give it away?" Auðun responded with a quick nod. The second sailor leaned in and said quietly, "If we sell it to him and he dies trying to transport the bear, then we'll just take it back and we'll keep the silver." Auðun looked at the animal again, at the sheer presence of it. He imagined the cold of a different world, like the bears were from a different realm altogether. Then he said, "Do we have a deal?" The words settled in like snow on everyone who heard. No one laughed this time. They took his silver, and in return, they gave him the chain. It was heavier than he expected. The weight that he felt wasn't just iron, it was responsibility and risk. The bear shifted again, sensing the change. Its head turned, slow, deliberate, fixing on him once more. For a heartbeat, Auðun wondered, not about the journey he was about to take, not about the kings he might meet, but about this moment. Had he just traded his life for something he didn't understand? For a risk that would cost him more than silver? Perhaps, but the choice had already been made. The transaction settled. Word spread quickly, as it always does in small places. By nightfall, everyone spoke of him in low, hushed tones, some with amusement, some with confusion, a few with something that sounded like respect, though they would not admit it as such. "What a fool," one said. "A senseless dreamer," said another. "He'll be dead before he reaches Norway," a third added. Auðun didn't hear any of it, and if he did, it had no bearing on his vision. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat near the ship, the chain coiled beside him, the sound of the bear's breathing rising and falling like the sea itself. The stars above were sharp and distant, the kind that offered no guidance, only witness. And somewhere in the quiet between breaths, a thought came to him, not in words, but in the realization of something undeniable. There was no going back, not to the life he had known, not to the common man's path carved for him by birth and circumstances. He had stepped off the trail for a moment, gave up everything for the thought of something greater on a distant shore. The sea waited. The horizon stretched on forever. Auðun, who had once been a small man in a small place, rose to his feet beside a creature no man should ever own. Some men are born to inherit their fate. Others build it piece by piece until it becomes too large to ignore. And some wait for the right moment, one moment where one bold choice changes everything. At dawn, he left Iceland. Now the sea doesn't care about a man or what he carries. It does not weigh his hopes or measure the worth of what he drags behind him. It rises and falls as it always has, cold, vast, indifferent. Whether a ship holds wool, timber, ivory, or a creature pulled from the edge of the world, the sea does not take note or care. Auðun stood on the prow as the coastline of the West Fjord slipped into memory. Behind him the bear shifted, the chain scraped wood, a low breath rolled across the deck, and even now that the journey had begun, the travelers on board gave them both space. Auðun rested his hand on the rail. Everything he had owned was gone, but it wasn't lost. It wasn't stolen. It was given. The only thing he owned was the bear and the risk. The voyage south was not kind. The waves made sure that no one on board was dry or comfortable. The winds turned constantly without warning, pressing the sail hard one day, abandoning it the next. The sea carried them forward one moment, and then seemed to reconsider, dragging them sideways into the gray and off course. Though chained and unable to roam, the bear was the most prepared and relaxed of all on board. It ate when fed, drank when allowed, and it watched, always watching. At night, when the others slept in uneasy turns, Auðun would sit near it, just beyond the reach of its strength. Not foolish enough to trust it, but unwilling to leave it alone. There was something majestic about it, confined but unbroken, immobile but strength that exists despite its circumstances. In that moment, Auðun realized the same could be said about everyone who grew up in the West Fjord. The problem was, too many had been broken, and they forgot how strong they actually are. After countless days, the ship made landfall in Norway. The Bergen harbor was alive with noise. Traders shouting, ships groaning against their moorings. The sharp scent of salt and smoke mingled in the air. Mountains and cliffs towered in the background. Word of their arrival and the bear spread quickly. Men came, then more. They gathered at a distance at first, then closer, curiosity pulling them in. A creature that most had only heard of in the stories. To see the creature up close, or even just catching a glimpse from a distance, was a once-in-a-lifetime experience for most. The first major test came when Auðun led the bear ashore. He was careful. Every step was measured. The chain taut. The bear moved reluctantly, its power contained by an extra set of chains, shortening its stride and the ability to extend a paw further than a basic step forward. The eyes of the crowd followed them. Anticipation of danger gripped their hearts. Some stood in awe, some took a calculated position just in case, but everyone wondered what was he going to do with such a creature. It didn't take long before the right people took notice and royal attention found him. A man approached, well-dressed, well-fed, the kind who had never wondered where his next meal would come from, adorned with silver chains and an arm ring, along with gold on his fingers. All the metal and the confidence with which he walked told everyone exactly where he came from. Auðun stopped in the road. The king's attendant stepped close and said, "I see you've brought something very unique." Every word he said were with his eyes fixed on the bear. Auðun lowered his head slightly. "Would your king have any interest in viewing the creature?" The man circled slowly, studying the animal with open interest. "You are far from home," he said. "And you aren't from here either, are you?" You must be from Greenland or Iceland. He continued, and this, he gestured to the bear, this is not something a man simply carries from port to port. No, that is true, Auðun said. The man smiled just enough. I could take it off your hands, he said, spare you the trouble, and pay you well for it. What do you say? There it was, the first real test. It would have been easy, more than easy. Silver in hand, turn a profit on a risky investment, and be done with the burden altogether. He could have walked away richer than he'd ever been, and no one would have questioned his choice. It was the fastest path back to a small life, even though it would have been just a little bigger than the last time. Auðun shook his head. It's not for sale. The man's face changed into a thoughtful negotiator. He'd played this game before. Everything is for sale, he said lightly. The question is only the price. Auðun said, the bear is not for sale. And he meant it. Everyone who heard him believed him, even the king's men. The man's gaze sharpened. Interest deepened into something else, curiosity with respect and perhaps a little irritation. Then what will you do with the beast, he asked. It's a gift for a king. And which king do you intend to give the animal to? Auðun met his eyes. The one who is willing to receive it. The answer hung there, simple and immovable. The man studied him for a moment longer, then gave a short laugh. Ha! You are either very bold or very foolish. We shall see, Auðun said. The man did not press the conversation further. Follow me. With that, the bear and Auðun had their course set. Before long, Auðun found himself standing in a great hall, a great distance from the harbor. Then a presence entered the room that felt every bit as large as the bear. It was the king. King Harald sat with the ease of a man confident and accustomed to being obeyed. He did not raise his voice. He did not lean forward. His eyes rested on the bear first, then Auðun. So, Harald said, his tone measured, you have brought something rare into my kingdom. Yes, Auðun answered. And you intend to take it with you from here? Yes. A flicker of something passed through the king's expression, amusement perhaps, or disbelief. Most men, Harald said, would consider it an honor to present such a gift here. I have no doubt, Auðun replied. Yet you choose to keep the beast? Yes, sir, I do. The room grew quieter. Harald leaned back slightly. You appear to have very little, that much is clear. And yet you carry something kings would value and should fetch a high price. He paused, continued. Why not give it to me, and I will see that you are compensated well. There it was again. The easy path, the safer road. Life could be better than it was. A king before him, power within reach, a handsome reward on the table. All it required was a shift, a change of intention, a willingness to let go of the journey and end it here. Auðun did not look away from the king. He simply said, I'm honored that I was able to show you such a magnificent animal, but it is not meant for you. Again, silence. For a long moment, Harald said nothing. Then slowly, he smiled, with something like recognition. You are a strange man, he said. If risking everything for something greater than a relegated life is strange, then, my king, I am the strangest. The king's gaze lingered, measuring. Then the king gave a slight nod and said, If that's how you define strange, then you're not the only strange one in this room. You have a clear vision for what your life should look like, and I believe you will see it through to the end. But know this, the road won't be easy. Auðun left the hall. The air outside all of a sudden felt sharper. The road ahead had changed, not in direction, but in weight. Because at that moment there was only the vision for what the future holds and what could have been had he sold the bear to the king of Norway. From Norway to Denmark, the journey stretched long, rough, and uncertain. The bear remained constant, its presence never allowing the crew to rest, its eyes always watching, its strength always one moment away from becoming catastrophe. Since the journey didn't end in Norway, the food for the crew was running thin. As they sailed across the sea, multiple days on end saw the path vanish into cold wind, crashing waves, and torrential rain. This was the moment when Auðun felt, not doubt exactly, but maybe the edges of it, The king's hall flashed before him, the offer of silver and a path back to his old life. The quiet question came into his mind, asking if there was anything to be gained by looking back at what if. The answer was easy. There was not. And from that moment, the confidence returned, the outcome still unknown, but the attempt to see it through was never doubted again. Auðun did the only thing that anyone can do when they've risked everything and find themselves at a distance unknown from the finish line. He took another step. He sailed another mile, woke to another sunrise, knowing that if that's all he could control today, that was enough. He knew that ahead of him was a shore, something new, and someone waiting. By the time they reached Denmark, the feeling had completely shifted. Blue skies and green rolling hills, no jagged cliffs, just endless green. It all seemed different. Its air even felt softer and warmer. But Auðun was not the same person that left the West Fjords. He was more fixed in purpose than ever, in the same way that a blade is fixed once it's been forged in the fire. Auðun stepped ashore. He walked with iron in his hands. The bear moved beside him, still chained, but no less imposing. Its fur looked different in the sunlight here, bright like the sun shining on fresh powder. People stood as he passed. Some stared openly. Others turned to tell of what had landed in their town, and many were confused by the sight. Word traveled ahead of him, as it always did. No one came to meet Auðun, but by the time he reached the king's hall, they were expecting him. The hall of King Svein was not like the places Auðun had ever seen or heard of before. It was larger, richer, the beams carved, the banners heavy with color and history. Firelight moved across the polished wood and metal, reflecting in ways that spoke of power that was held and displayed for all to see. Men stood along the walls, warriors, advisors, men who had built their place in the king's hall through strength, loyalty, and victory. And at the far end sat the king. Svein did not rise when Auðun entered. He watched as Auðun approached, as the bear came into view, as murmurs rippled outward. For a moment no one spoke. A few were ready with their grip on a weapon, just in case the bear decided to be done with the chains. The bear stepped forward, its weight pressing into the floor beneath it. The chains remained firm in Auðun's grip, though his hands and face bore the marks of the journey, raw, worn, and tested. He stopped at the proper distance, not too close, not too far, and for the first time since leaving the West Fjord, he allowed himself to breathe. "This," Auðun said, his voice steady despite the weight of every mile behind him, "is a gift for you." The words moved through the hall, quiet and undeniable. Svein's gaze shifted from the bear to the man. "For me?" the king asked. "For you." A pause. Consideration. Kings are not often surprised, but this was not expected. "You've come far," Svein said. "I have, and I've brought you something no man in your great land has seen." "This is true." The king leaned forward just slightly. "And yet you give it freely." There it was. The question beneath all others, not what it was, not where it came from, but why. Auðun didn't look at the bear. He didn't look at the men watching him. He looked at the king and he said, "Yes, I'm here to present this as a gift to you." No price was named, no favor requested, no conditions offered. Something in the room shifted. Men who had spent their lives trading, bargaining, measuring worth against worth, found themselves without a framework for what stood before them. This was not how things were done, which is exactly what made it unexplainably more powerful. Svein rose, not quickly, not dramatically, with intent. He stepped down from the throne and approached Auðun, drawing the hall tighter around the moment. The bear watched him. The king's men watched the bear. No one moved. The king stopped a short distance away, close enough to notice the size, the sheer presence of the creature, and Auðun's calm confidence. He turned to Auðun. "You are not a wealthy man," he said. Auðun didn't deny it. "You've risked a lot to bring this here." "I have. And you ask nothing in return." "I ask only that you receive it as a gift." Svein smiled. "Then it is received," he said. What followed did not come all at once. Fortune rarely does. Many times it's almost imperceptible until a man looks back and realizes he's no longer standing where he began. Auðun was given a place to live. For him, that would have been enough. But the act, the bravery, the gift, men spoke of him constantly. The man who had brought the bear, the man who refused Norway, the man who asked for nothing in return. And the king made sure that Auðun had everything he needed. Days turned into months. The bear became part of the court's life, fed, guarded, marveled at. It was shown to those who came as honored guests. It became a symbol of Denmark's power and reputation, the kind of reputation that makes its way all the way to the edges of the world. The gift continued to gain value as time went on, and for that the king continued to respond by sending gifts of his own to Auðun. Auðun never lacked and had everything he ever needed, but the story doesn't end there. One evening, when the fire burned low and the hall was soft with quiet conversations, Auðun stepped forward and approached the king. No bear this time, no audience, just a man and a simple request. "My lord," he said, "I ask your leave to go on a journey." Svein studied him. "You've just come into favor," the king said. "You have everything you need here in my kingdom, and you would walk away from it?" "For a time. You see, my king, when you live on the edge of the world, a man can settle for seeing only what is before him. I would like to see what lies beyond." Svein watched him, then almost amused. "You are an adventurer of a man. Seems your fjord wasn't ever going to be strong enough to hold you. The bear was just your seminal moment, the spark that lit a fire that's still burning." The king gave a faint smile and said, "Go." Just like that, permission given. But the king wasn't finished. Before Auðun could leave, one of the king's men approached, carrying something wrapped in cloth. It was heavy. "This is for your journey." Auðun took it, unwrapped it. It was full of silver, more than he had ever seen at one time, more than he had ever imagined holding. He looked up, but the king had already turned away, as if such a thing required no acknowledgement. And in that moment, the path that led to this moment had finally become clear. It was a strange journey. It certainly wasn't logical, and it wasn't safe. The whole thing was shaped by decisions that made no sense until they did. He had given everything, and in return, he had been given more than wealth, more than favor, something even more rare: trust. Auðun's world grew wider than ever. The road was uncertain once more, but the weight of it all felt familiar, not because it was the same, but because it carried the same question: how will this journey shape who he becomes, or reveal who he already was but didn't know it yet? Behind him, the bear remained a symbol, a story, a reminder that some risks are not taken for gain, but for something far less certain and far more powerful. Some men change their fortune with strength, others with strategy, but it's far more rare to change it with a gift. And that is the tale of Auðun of the West Fjords, a man who began with nothing, gave everything, and walked away with more than most ever dreamed of. The way was not through power, not through status, but through the kind of courage the sagas rarely celebrate out loud, the courage to give without the guarantee of return. This isn't just legend. This story was actually written down and preserved in medieval manuscripts in Iceland. The mention of real kings placed the story in the 11th century, even though it was written down much later in medieval Iceland. What makes the story rare isn't just that it includes real kings, it's what it doesn't include. No hero, no battles, no fighting. In a world built on strength, Auðun's story is about what can be gained by giving something away. So what do we do with a story like this? It's easy to admire it, much harder to live it out. Auðun's world, the world of the Viking Age, it ran on reputation, honor, and risk. We often think things are much different now, but are they? You see, most people have the same mantra as the West Fjord. I'm not that kind of person. Well, it's not the right time. Oh, I'll do something different once things settle down. And most people, they wait until they have enough to be generous. Auðun became something more because he gave when he had nothing, because he risked everything, because he said, there's no time like the present, it's time to go. A lot of what Auðun did is upside down for his culture, for his time, and for us today. maybe that's the point, and maybe that's a dangerous way of thinking, because that one will lead you on a path where you actually want to go, because that's the kind of mindset that actually changes your life. This story is not about generosity. It's about realizing you were never meant to stay small. Auðun refused to settle, and he took a chance. He made the first move, which is more than most people make. You can do more. I believe that everybody is capable of more. Now, they're going to find more at their own pace, but I think you'll be surprised that the first step leads to a much easier second step. And then when you get there, an easier third step. And after you've taken 3 steps in any direction, congratulations, you're on an adventure. And where you end up, well, we'll see. But that's the exciting part. And if you felt a quiet pull of something bigger, riskier, more meaningful, and if through this story you felt that, a pull towards something bigger, maybe more risk, then don't let it sit there. Act on it. There is no next step that's too small or too big. Just take the step that you can take. And if you saw another lesson in Auðun's story, something I didn't mention, drop it in the comments. Because the best sagas don't end when the story stops. They keep unfolding in the people who hear them, talk about them, and retell them. So until next time, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and make sure you check out Great Northern Viking Festival for an opportunity to bring your own saga to life. You can find them on all major social media platforms or at greatnorthernvikingfestival.com.